Have you ever been there? You're standing at a register, maybe you've just finished a really incredible meal. The waiter drops that little black folder on the table. You reach for your back pocket, confident, ready to pay, and your hand just hits fabric. Nothing.
Oh, that specific drop in your stomach, the
Yeah.
cold sweat. It is a completely universal human experience.
It's primal, isn't it? It's not just about the money. It's about social survival, the ultimate nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
But, for you or me, that panic usually ends with a frantic run to the car or an awkward, hey, can I just Venmo you later?
Right. It's a momentary glitch in the matrix, a small blip.
Exactly. But in today's deep dive, we're looking at one specific moment of panic back in 1949. And it didn't just end with an awkward apology. It actually broke the world economy and then put it back together in a completely different shape.
It really is the ultimate butterfly effect. We're looking at a stack of sources today that are, they're fascinatingly diverse. We have these historical biographies from mid-century New York, but we've also got these heavy economic analyses of, modern digital payment systems in China and Brazil.
And our mission today is to connect those dots, to understand how one man's desire to never, ever wash dishes for 6 hours accidentally invented the modern credit card, generated trillions of dollars in global debt, and this is the part that really surprised me, why the technology he invented is actually on its deathbed right now.
That is the key insight. We tend to think of the credit card as a permanent fixture of life, like gravity or taxes, but the data suggests it's really a temporary bridge technology, and that bridge is starting to crumble.
So let's go back to the start of the bridge. Let's set the scene. It's 1949, New York City. The post-war boom is just starting to rev up.
And we are at a restaurant called Major's Cabin Grill. It's a steakhouse right near the Empire State Building, a place for power lunches, for serious dinners.
And enter our protagonist, Frank McNamara.
Ah.
Now, looking at the profile in the source material, Frank isn't just some random guy. He's a player.
Oh, yeah, he is. He runs the Hamilton Credit Corporation. So he's in the business of lending, ironically enough. And on this particular night, he's entertaining some associates. And in 1949, entertaining had a very specific code.
Oh, the 3-martini lunch era.
Exactly. You are the host. You control the table. You control the flow of food, of drink. And crucially, you handle the bill. It's a performance of power and stability.
So Frank is there, probably feeling like the king of Manhattan. The source mentions they were likely eating something heavy, steaks, chops. The dinner ends. The bill arrives. The table goes quiet. Frank reaches into his suit jacket and realizes he's left his wallet in his other suit.
Okay, and we need to pause here because the context of 1949 makes this infinitely worse than it is today. Today you have Apple Pay, you have banking apps, you can call a friend to transfer funds instantly.
Back then?
You had cash. Or you had a personal check, which a restaurant might not even take from a stranger, even a well-dressed one. That was it.
The source describes his internal monologue as emptier than my soul during a Monday morning meeting. I just love that line. But seriously, the panic was real. The source jokes that he was mentally calculating how many dishes he'd have to scrub to work off a steak dinner for 4 people.
It was a total humiliation. In front of business peers, he was revealed to be, at least in that moment, insolvent. It just shatters your credibility.
And the resolution. He didn't wash dishes. But he did something that, for a man with his ego, might have actually been worse.
He had to call his wife.
That walk of shame to the payphone in the back.
She had to drive all the way from Long Island to downtown Manhattan to bring him cash. The source calls the restaurant a lobster prison while he waited.
Can you imagine sitting there for an hour, your associates just kind of wondering what's going on, sipping water, just waiting for your wife to come bail you out? For most people, that's a never do that again moment. You bite a wallet chain. You check your pockets 3 times before you leave the house.
But Frank's brain worked differently. He didn't just want to solve the problem for himself. He saw a systemic failure. He walked out of there thinking, why is my ability to eat dinner tied to the physical paper in my pocket?
He wanted to separate the eating from the paying.
Precisely. He wanted to decouple consumption from currency. He wanted a way to prove he was good for the money without having the actual money right there.
So Frank grabs his lawyer, a guy named Ralph Schneider, and together they cook up this scheme. They think, what if we could convince restaurants to just trust us?
And trust is the key word there. They weren't proposing a bank loan. They were proposing a middleman system. They created a club, the Diners Club.
Fast forward to February 8, 1950, the launch. Now, this is the detail that just blew my mind. When I think credit card, I think of that satisfying clack of plastic on a table. or maybe metal if you're fancy. But the first Diners Club card,
It was cardboard.
cardboard,
Yeah, it was essentially a thick business card.
that is just wild to me. You're trying to look like a high roller, and you hand the waiter a piece of paper stock that's probably, disintegrating in your sweaty palm because you're nervous it won't even work.
It does sound absurd now. But you have to remember, there were no magnetic stripes, no chips, no electronic terminals. The card was just a visual ID. The waiter would look at the card, write down your name and number, and send the bill to Diners Club later.
And then Diners Club would pay the restaurant and collect from you.
Correct.
So talk to me about the economics of this cardboard era.
Yeah.
How did they actually make money?
This is a really crucial distinction from modern credit cards. Initially, they made money on the float and on fees. They charged the restaurant 7%.
Ouch. 7%. That's a huge chunk of the margin for a restaurant.
It is high, but they told the restaurant, look, we are bringing you the businessmen. We're bringing you the big spenders with expense accounts. And then they charged the cardholder, the user, $3 a year.
Which is like, what, 30 or 40 bucks today?
Roughly, yeah. But here is the absolute key. There was no interest.
No interest.
None. You had to pay the bill in full at the end of the month. It wasn't a credit card in the way we use that term today. It was a charge card. The source describes their collection strategy as pay up or we'll embarrass you worse than Frank was embarrassed.
So it was purely a convenience product. It solved the I forgot my wallet problem. It hadn't yet created the I'm drowning in debt problem.
Exactly. But the uptake was instant. The sources call it a snowball effect. They started with just 14 restaurants in New York. Within a year, they had 20,000 members. By 1951, 40,000.
Wow. People loved it. The concept of buy now, pay later was just born. It must have felt like magic.
And naturally, whenever a business model explodes like that, the sharks start circling.
And to the big boys.
1958 was the watershed year. American Express launches their card, and then Bank of America launches the Bank Americard, which you'd know today as the grandfather of Visa.
And this is where the material itself changes, right?
Right.
You say goodbye to the cardboard.
Yes.
The industry shifts to plastic.
Which feels so symbolic. The source makes a great point here. Plastic is durable. It's virtually indestructible, just like the debt it creates.
That is a cynical but pretty accurate reading because with the arrival of the banks, the entire business model fundamentally shifted. Diners Club was about service fees. Banks, they realized they could make money on time.
This is where we get into the revolving credit.
Correct. The banks introduced the option to not pay the full bill. You could pay a minimum amount and roll the rest over to the next month for a fee.
Interest.
Compounding interest. This changed everything. It shifted the customer base from businessmen who want convenience to, well, everyone who wants things they can't afford right now.
The source puts it so bluntly. Banks realize that human beings are terrible at math and have very little impulse control. In the industry, they actually have terms for this. A person who pays off their bill in full every month, the responsible user, is called a deadbeat by the credit card companies.
A deadbeat for being responsible.
Yeah, because they generate no interest profit. The ideal customer is the revolver, the person who stays in debt forever, just paying enough to keep the account open.
That's dark. It's predatory.
It is the engine of the industry. And to keep that engine running, they had to, gamify spending.
And this is where the rewards come in, right? The points, the
The
miles.
bribes, as one source calls them, they needed to make you feel good about spending money, so they gamified it. Spend $10,000, get a free flight to Florida.
And our brains go, wow, a free flight. Meanwhile, we paid $2,000 in interest to get it. We're basically paying for the flight twice, but it feels free.
Precisely. It masks the pain of paying. Behavioral economists talk about this pain of paying. When you hand over cash, you physically feel the loss. You see your wallet get thinner. When you swipe a piece of plastic or tap a phone, that pain is just anesthetized.
The source notes that banks turned fee creation into an art form. Annual fees, late fees, over-limit fees, foreign transaction fees. It's like Picasso walked so credit card companies could run.
And the result of this massive adoption and the revolving credit model, the source cites that by 2008, Americans alone held $1 trillion in credit card debt.
1 trillion. That's 12 zeros.
All because Frank McNamara didn't want to wash some dishes.
It's just this massive global infrastructure built on the psychology of impatience. Frank wanted to avoid embarrassment. The system that followed capitalized on our desire for instant gratification.
It's the perfect trap.
So we have this empire. Plastic rules the world. Visa and MasterCard are everywhere. But, and here is the twist in our deep dive, the sources suggest this empire is actually crumbling.
It is. The credit card is facing an existential threat. And ironically, it's being killed by the very thing Frank was chasing: a better, faster, more convenient way to pay.
The killer is in your pocket right now.
The smartphone. And the rise of what's called open banking.
Let's look internationally, because the U.S. is actually a bit behind on this. The source points to China as a window into the future.
Right. If you go to China today and you try to hand someone a credit card, they will look at you like you're trying to pay with a checkbook. Or like bartering with beads. It's a relic.
They just skipped the plastic era entirely.
Largely, yes. They went from cash straight to digital wallets.
Yeah.
WeChat Pay and Alipay, you don't swipe anything. You scan a QR code.
And that's not running on the credit card networks.
Often, no. It's
Yeah.
direct from wallet to wallet. And that is the terrifying part for Visa and MasterCard.
Because they lose their fees.
Exactly. And let's look at Brazil for an even clearer example. The source highlights a system called PIX.
PAX. Sounds like a movie studio, but tell me about it.
It's a government-backed instant payment system. It allows anyone to transfer money to anyone else instantly, 247.
And the cost?
For individuals, it's usually free.
Free, 0.
Compare that to the U.S., where a merchant pays, what, 2 or 3% every time you swipe your Visa card? That 3% is the entire profit margin for some businesses like grocery stores.
So if I'm a restaurant owner and I can take a PIX payment for free or a credit card payment for a 3% fee, I'm throwing the credit card machine in the trash.
That's exactly what's happening. The source notes that American banks are terrified of this model spreading. Their entire empire is built on what economists call rent-seeking, just sitting in the middle of a transaction and taking a tiny bite. If technology lets us connect directly peer-to-peer, the middleman starves.
And even here in the West, the physical card is disappearing. I mean, I barely carry a wallet anymore. I just use Apple Pay.
But even with Apple Pay, you're usually still using a digital version of a Visa or MasterCard in the background, but that's changing too. Look at Venmo. Look at buy now, pay later apps like Klarna or Affirm. They are building new networks that are starting to bypass the old rails. Brad paid Jessica for pizza isn't a banking transaction, it's a social interaction.
It's full circle. It's going back to trust and direct connection, just, digitally intermediated.
And the physical token, the card itself, is becoming totally irrelevant.
Which leads us to the funniest irony in all of this. We started this story with Frank McNamara panicking because he forgot his wallet.
All right.
We have innovated our way right back to the exact same panic.
How do you mean?
Frank's problem was, I don't have the object. Our problem today is, my battery died.
Huh. That is a profound point. If your phone dies at 11 p.m. after a dinner, you are just as stranded as Frank was in 1949. Maybe even more so.
Because Frank could at least ask for a phone book. He could call his wife. Who memorizes numbers anymore? If my battery dies, I don't know my wife's number, I don't know my Uber login, I'm a ghost.
We've traded one anxiety for another. We traded the anxiety of carrying cash for the anxiety of battery percentage.
And the source points out another risk. Cash never crashes.
Correct. A server outage at Amazon Web Services doesn't stop a dollar bill from working. But as we move to a cashless society, Sweden is almost there, the source notes we become entirely dependent on the grid.
The source mentions kids today view cash as a historical artifact. Like, Grandpa, tell us about the paper money again. Did you have to fold it? What if it got wet?
It's efficient, but it's fragile. If the power goes out, commerce just starves.
And the credit card companies, they know they're becoming dinosaurs, right? The source describes them as panicking.
They are, and you can see it in their marketing. Have you noticed how heavy credit cards have become lately?
Yes, the metal ones. You drop it and it cracks the tile floor. They weigh like 2 pounds.
That is a desperate attempt to create perceived value. As the utility of the card becomes invisible, just software in the cloud, they're trying to make the physical object feel premium. They're adding weight, lasers, fingerprint scanners.
It's like a last gasp.
Look at me, I'm still important, I'm heavy. Exactly, it's the behavior of a legacy technology trying to stay relevant. But the friction is disappearing. Amazon has stores now where you just walk in, grab a sandwich, and walk out. You don't even scan anything. Cameras watch you, and the money just leaves your account.
Which is incredibly convenient and also vaguely dystopian.
It is the ultimate realization of Frank's dream. He wanted to eat without the interruption of paying. We're getting there. But we might not like what we find at the destination.
Imagine trying to explain this to Frank. Hey, Frank, good news. You don't need a wallet, but the store is watching your biometric data, and if your phone battery dies, you're stranded, and you also owe the bank 18% interest on that stake.
He would probably just say, I just wanted to pay for dinner.
That's the line that sticks with me. I just wanted to pay for dinner.
It's a lesson in unintended consequences. Every solution creates a new problem. Frank solved the wallet issue, but he created the debt crisis. We solved the card issue with phones and created privacy and dependency issues.
The source puts it perfectly. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people we don't like. And now we do it instantly with a wave of our hand.
And without even feeling the pain of the transaction. It's frictionless consumption.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what is the takeaway? We've gone from bartering chickens to gold to paper to cardboard to plastic, and now to invisible data.
I think the takeaway is to look at the tools in your pocket or on your screen and realize they aren't neutral. They are designed to change how you behave. The credit card wasn't just a payment method, it was a psychological shift that changed the global economy.
And the next shift, biometrics, crypto, whatever comes next, it's going to change
And
everything.
history is any guide. The next revolution will probably start with someone being embarrassed in a restaurant.
Probably because their face scan was declined in front of a date.
Sorry, sir, your face has insufficient funds.
Very likely.
So pour one out for Frank McNamara, the man who speed-ran the entire life cycle of capitalism in 75 years. He forgot his wallet, changed the world, and now his invention is becoming a relic. A reminder that everything is temporary.
And a reminder to charge your phone before you go out to dinner.
Always good advice.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Frank's problem was physical. He liked the object. Our problem is becoming existential. We rely on invisible networks. If the power goes out or the server crashes, are we actually worse off than Frank was in 1949? At least he could have washed dishes. I'm not sure they'd even let us into the kitchen today.
A disturbing thought to end on.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Check your pockets, charge your phones, and we'll catch you next time.